This is a podcast that seeks justice. Justice for the lives stolen by those in society that hide amongst us every day. Hidden in our towns, cities, and countrysides, the places that we work, and sometimes in our very own homes. This is Hidden Killers.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Tony Bruschi. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts so you don't miss any of our breaking updates on the stories that we are covering for you here. Today we're talking about the Bryan Kohberger case with former FBI CIA agent Tracy Walder. Tracy, we've been all watching this now play out for the last several months. New pieces and bits coming here and there. We learned very recently about some of the disciplinary action that was taken against Kohberger while he was employed at Pullman University and Washington State. I'm curious to get your thoughts on motivation here. Did the disciplinary actions play a role in the fact that these students were murdered within 24 hours of one of those actions, if in fact Kohberger is the killer?
You know, we have to look at what seem like silly motivations to us are very, serious motivations to him. And I think now that we have these revelations that have come out about him, well, sort of being fired, but also being talked to just about a week or two prior to the murders, to me, it goes to talk about really like why that date, right? Like, why did he kill them at that particular time? And we know that there are, phone calls, possible sightings of him around the area as early as like August and September, right? Why did he wait until that date in November? And so I think that gives us insight into what I guess sort of lit the fuse to explode sooner rather than later. So I don't know that that's the full motivation, but I think it's the motivation for perhaps why then. But I also think I think his motivation, in my opinion, is twofold. I think the first one is that he truly wanted to understand what it was like to kill someone. And I think that's evidenced by his IRB research that he did that has since come out. I think he wanted to understand what that felt like. And I think that's not obviously normal to us, but I think this is something he wanted to do. I also think that, he made a lot more of whatever small contact he had. And I believe his targets were either Maddie or Kaylee, probably Maddie. But I believe whatever small contact he had, he made that out to be a lot more. And so I think that's sort of his second motivation.
When it comes to people like that, where they have this distorted view of a relationship or a connection with someone, how does that come about? Is that something where it kind of goes back to childhood, or I mean, where does this, kind of break into such a distortion?
I think if we generalize, that this is something that happened when he was a child, right, then we sort of are generalizing anyone that had trauma.
Sure.
I know that it's been reported that he was a victim of bullying, right? And I know that it's been reported that he had some, unique eating habits and those kinds of things. But the thing is a lot of people have been victims of bullying, right? And they don't engage in this behavior. A lot of people suffer from mental illnesses and they don't engage in this behavior. So part of me does wonder if it's something that he was born with, per se, but it's hard to say.
Sure. Can you give me some insight into the role of the FBI in the investigation of this case? Obviously, local had quite a bit of involvement early on, but how does that all play together with FBI's cooperation with the local authorities on something like this?
Sure. The FBI in a situation like this is mostly going to be there to lend resources, right? And so the resources come in the form of equipment, stuff, right?
Sure.
New resources and technologies. It comes in the form of more hands. That could be the evidence response team. That could be other special agents. And it also could be in terms of funding, allocating some more resources towards the local police department. So that would have been their role. Their role wasn't to take over the case. That lies with local law enforcement. And I really do think this is an example of local law enforcement and the FBI working together in their respective roles as they should. And I think they both did an excellent job.
What kind of role does the FBI take in terms of verifying accuracy of evidence or collecting evidence in relation to this case with the connection to the local authorities?
I don't know that they would necessarily have a particular lane. They are responsible for collecting and gathering their own evidence,
Mhm.
right? And they are responsible for keeping that evidence safe and keeping it uncontaminated. That is the FBI's job in collecting their evidence, and same with local law enforcement. Now, might FBI be helping them and ensuring that it's taken properly? Yes, but they're not there to necessarily babysit local law enforcement and ensure, right, that that's done properly. But they are there to ensure that their particular evidence is gathered properly.
What's been your take thus far on the gag order that's been issued in this case to keep everyone silent? I know the Gonzalez family speaking out against it. Their attorney saying that it shouldn't exist. It's still in the judge's hands as to where it's going to go. Good thing, bad thing? What are your thoughts?
I think that I'm not sure that the judge had much of a choice. And that's thanks to social media, right? And internet sleuths, which we can't turn off. I'm not mad at them per se.
Mhm.
But, the judge realizes that if any of that information gets out there, and if any of it is, exposed to a potential jury pool or those kinds of things, that would actually really contaminate the state government's ability to prosecute the case properly. And then you're going to be dealing with changes of venues, changes in counties, and all those kinds of things. And then that doesn't ultimately give the families the justice that I think they're entitled to. However, if I was the victim's family, I would be very frustrated that I couldn't find out more in terms of what led to the death of my child. So I completely understand where the family is coming from, and I respect that they want more. But I also understand where the judge is coming from as well, and I'm wondering if there's a happy medium that they can agree to.
Early on in a case like this, there was a lot of criticism about what was coming out to the public, and a lot of people viewing it as they weren't doing a very good job. One of those things was talking about security camera footage, and individual reporters going to businesses going, did anyone ask you for this footage? What was going on behind the scenes when those things were going on, in your opinion? Was this information that they really just didn't need the extra footage at that moment in time because they already had a path that they were going down? Or were those pieces that they should have already gathered up?
So I said very early on, probably like 2 weeks into the case, that I felt that they already had a suspect, which they did.
Yeah.
And that's why they were being so tight-lipped. I sort of infamously said that. A lot of people got very frustrated with me, but obviously I know how these things work, and
Yeah.
I felt that the reason they were being so tight-lipped is because they had someone in mind. And I do think that they probably had, now that we know what they had because the affidavit has been released, they had enough evidence. They didn't necessarily need those security footages. And look, I fully appreciate the work that the internet sleuths and the media is doing. I don't think that that's wrong per se, but we also have to remember that law enforcement is doing their job, and they were doing their job methodically and well. And at that point, I think that they already had the avenues that they needed to get the information that they needed about Kohberger, because they would have already had him on their radar when people were asking for that security footage.
So at that point, it was not necessarily needed per se at that moment, but to make the public shut up, for lack of a better term, was it just kind of requested, do you think, at that time? Like, okay, let's get them kind of, sufficed over here. We don't really need this, but to keep everybody off their backs, is that something that they consider doing in those sort of cases?
Typically, no, because you need a warrant to do that, and that
Okay.
can be cumbersome.
Okay.
So, I mean, look, I don't put anything past anyone at this point. And I think, too, when they released the information about the Elantra as well, they didn't necessarily know 100% that Kohberger, was their guy.
Sure.
At that point, they were starting to sort of unravel things. But I think that they already knew the Elantra, they knew the make and model that they were looking for, and they didn't necessarily need that security footage.
Tracy Walder, former FBI CIA agent, thank you so much for your insight into this case. I want you to press subscribe if you can, wherever you download podcasts, so you don't miss any of our breaking updates and discussions on the cases that we're following for you. If you like listening with no ads, you can do that through Apple Podcasts. We have that option for you right there. You can even try that for 3 days free. Greatly appreciate that support. Until next time, for all of us here, I am Tony Bruschi. Thanks for listening.